Hello and welcome. This is the Junior Achievement Finance Park Virtual Teacher Training. I'm pulling up our presentation just right now. My name is Sam Hodap. I am Junior Achievement of Central Maryland's Capstone Director. I work with our programs JA BizTown and JA Finance Park, which we will be going into in much more detail here shortly. Thank you very much for your time and going through this teacher training. We're excited to have you working with this program with your students. This training, we're going to go over the program JA Finance Park Virtual, which is how we host JA Finance Park here in Junior Achievement of Central Maryland. We are going to be going in the ins and outs of the program itself and explaining how you can approach the curriculum, how to best teach, as well as how you will be able to operate the simulation, which we will provide you access to. So some background, Junior Achievement Finance Park is one of two JA Capstone programs that we host here in JA Central Maryland. Capstone programs include a curriculum of lessons that are taught in the classroom and have an experiential activity that deepens learning in the form of a simulation to the end. This is JA Finance Park, which we do primarily at the middle school level here in Central Maryland, but some areas have had success implementing this program with high school students. We also host here in Maryland JA Finance Park, which is the second JA Capstone program. JA BizTown, a 5th grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade. JA BizTown focuses really heavily on the economy as a whole and students' role within it. JA Finance Park, which we're going into today, really heavily talks about personal finance, students learning about careers, taxes, how to earn money and spend money, and save money wisely. Today's training has a few objectives. I want to make sure that you as teacher understand the JA Finance Park curriculum, what objectives and information it hopes to cover with you and your students, how to effectively use the provided curriculum, what teacher responsibilities there are for successfully setting up and helping your students through the online culminating simulation, as well as all the technical operation bits thereof. In terms of the program and how you interact with it, I've been with JA about 3 years, and one of the great things about our programs is we do try to make it as easy to approach and easy to implement for you as educators as possible. We really try to lay them out in a very structured and logical fashion that you're going to be familiar with as a teacher. So the preparation time is kept to a minimum. The curriculum itself includes online options, digging deeper, and extension activities so that you can customize and you can build it out as you see fit. There's a good number of games and research activities throughout the curriculum, and we want to make sure that those help the students have fun while they're learning this important financial literacy information. And lastly, the curriculum has a good number of extension activities. These are really wonderful because they help give teachers more material to just add additional learning opportunities and really deepen the content that's covered in this curriculum. I will say for you as educators, as you go through this program, there is an availability to earn 2 CPD credits. These credits are authorized through MSDE, Maryland State Department of Education. We are an authorized endorser of CPD credits. In order to receive those 2 CPD credits, teachers must go through this training, implement the Finance Park program. With your students, you'll need to complete the pre-tests and post-tests, which we make available on our website. You also need to have your students not just do the lessons, but the simulation at the end of the curriculum. And additionally, we want to ask that you send student thank you notes to JA of Central Maryland. These are for our supporters that help make the JA Finance Park program possible in our area to reach your students. And lastly, the requirement of attending 2 of 4 webinars, which we schedule here in Central Maryland that are made for you, the teacher, as the audience. We schedule 4. They're in the spring of each school year, and you'll just need to attend 2 of 4 of those in order to receive those CPD credits.
Excuse me, Sam? How do we as teachers know, like, when we have to decide whether or not we're going to apply for the CPD credits?
Oh, thank you. That is a great question. There is really no hard deadline by which you must have decided. The webinars themselves are scheduled. They are usually scheduled by October 1st of the school year. They will be distributed to you once that schedule is finalized. And to attend 2, you'll at least need to be decided by the last 2 of those 4 webinars. Aside from that, I know a lot of schools will implement the Finance Park program in the spring. So the final decision can be made really as you're starting the program. We just need to make sure that the students do the pre-test before starting lessons, the post-test after completing the simulation, and making sure that your students, after going through the curriculum, send to us thank you notes so that we can help keep this program available to all of our students. A great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, as we dive into the program itself, the components, it's a pretty simply laid out program. We are right now going through the teacher training. This will allow you availability to request your materials through JA of Central Maryland. You will have classroom instruction, which is guided by the curriculum guide, which you will receive. The student online simulation is available through our hosted website and can be accessed from any computer at really any time. Most schools will do the online simulation during the school day, but there is the availability to have students do it after school as a homework assignment. And then completing the post-simulation activities and debriefs as well. For the curriculum itself, we do make all program materials that you will need online available through the JA of Central Maryland website. I am going to go ahead and go out of this presentation just so you can see. This is actually a screen grab of our website on which we have all the surveys and PowerPoint decks. This link is down here at the bottom. You don't necessarily need to worry about copying that link, because if you'll simply Google JA of Central Maryland, it will direct you to our website, which you see here. To get to these resources, you'll simply go to the top right to Programs. This drop-down will enable you to access the Educator resources. And at the Educator resources, the first program is our other capstone program, JA Vistown. And the second down is JA Finance Park. Here you will find a number of resources, most importantly, all the PowerPoints that you will need for the lessons of Finance Park Virtual, a technical guide on the simulation, which will also be sent to you via email, and the pre and post program surveys so that students can complete these prior to doing their lessons and after the simulation has completed, respectively. Okay, we're diving in right now to the curriculum basics. What you'll see here is a visualization of all the units of Finance Park Virtual. As you can see, there are 4 separate units as they're color-coded here prior to the simulation, which is followed by the debrief. The 4 units include income, talking about earning and planning an income. The second unit, saving, investing, and risk management, talks about preparing to save, how to invest, and how to manage risk. The third unit, debit and credit, goes into spending options, as well as a little bit more on banking partners. And the fourth unit, Budget Plus, which is a great lead into the simulation. Move on if there's not any questions.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes.
Do these units need to be presented in exactly this order, or can you do them at your own leisure?
Oh, thank you. This order that you see here is how the program has been trialed, how it was developed, and how most areas do the curriculum. And if you are new to Finance Park Virtual, I always suggest this is just the easiest way to approach it. Some teachers do deviate from this order, and that's completely okay. The important thing is that the content is covered prior to the simulation. Many teachers may go from income to the debit and credit unit because they see a logical flow between those two topics, and then go back to saving, investing, and risk management, followed by Budget Plus. The only strong suggestion I have is doing Budget Plus right before the simulation because the content so closely aligns. Great question, though. Thank you. As we look at the curriculum materials, you may have your teacher guide with you, you may not. The materials that you'll have and all that you will need for this program are the teacher curriculum, which includes the teacher guide, which we'll be walking through, the posters for your classroom, the physical Savvy Shop or game sets, which goes along with one of the units that students will go through, the student workbooks, which are the green workbooks that you're going to see here. That workbook, you'll get one per student, and the PowerPoint decks, which go along with all of our online resources available through the website, as I pointed out earlier.
If I could just ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So I want to get started, but I don't have the teacher binder. How would I get that?
Oh, great. Wonderful question. That actually leads right into our next slide, talking about requesting and receiving material. I understand if you're a new teacher, you do not have your curriculum materials. We at Junior Achievement of Central Maryland will actually arrange to have materials sent to your program, sent to your school to your attention. This training, as I mentioned before, will qualify you as a JA Finance Park teacher. After you complete this webinar training, you will be able to register your school's program and request materials, which is through the same link that you actually access this webinar training. Requesting materials, we'll just need to know your school, your name, other teachers, as well as how many students you have, because we'll be sending you one student workbook. And if you are a new teacher and you let us know in that form that you do not have a teacher curriculum packet, one of those will be sent to you. The materials, for your knowledge, will be sent via UPS volunteers. Our great partner UPS has actually arranged for their employees to deliver materials to the school. If for some reason you would prefer not to wait the expected 3-week lead time for materials, or you're in the area, you can choose in that registration to pick up your materials at the JA of Central Maryland offices, and we are located in Owings Mills, Maryland. When you have that curriculum guide in front of you, you'll see these tabs here, and it's okay if you don't have it in front of you because we'll be walking through these pieces of the actual physical teacher curriculum itself. The tabs that you'll see in your binder, starting off is Getting Started, which has a lot of preliminary overview information for you as teachers. The following tabs will be labeled Option 1, Traditional and Extension Activities. For your knowledge, this relates to the option to do these lessons either in a traditional fashion or Option 2, which is our project-based learning approach to these lessons. I usually suggest that teachers who are not familiar yet with the curriculum or only have a few years of experience or are not very familiar with project-based learning don't really even worry about those lessons so much. It takes a little bit more experience, and it's a different way of approaching all of the content. As you get into the program, I suggest starting with the traditional lessons, which is why today's training we will only cover Option 1 and how those lessons are laid out. So we're going to dive right into the curriculum. This is what you'll see. It'll look exactly like this for you when you have your curriculum if you don't have it in front of you. The lessons for all of our traditional lessons, for your convenience, are laid out exactly the same. The content obviously changes, but the format and the layout is very, very similar across all lessons. This is so that we can make the lessons as easy to approach as possible, as we mentioned before. So looking at the pages, you'll see them look very similar to this. Each one of these units and lessons has a symbol for each one of the units. This is in the income unit, the first unit. So you'll see the important parts are in red, including the text and the ribbon on the right side. They're all denoted by this symbol in the upper right-hand corner of a dollar bill. The table of contents are always listed on the front page, which will have the number of core lessons, and below it, they'll include the extension activities as well. Income has 3 traditional core lessons, and it has 8 extension activities. In that, excuse me, in the individual lessons themselves, you'll see that each lesson has an expected time allotment. Most of these lessons are allotted about 45 minutes, so you'll see that across all lessons. Additionally, it has materials on the right side. Whenever there is new vocabulary that is introduced, you'll see that in the same color here and listed with both the terms and the definitions. Anytime that students are going to be doing an activity in their student workbook, you will see on the right side here where it's circled, you'll have a thumbnail of what that page is going to look like in your teacher guide. So you'll be able to see a quick snapshot of what your students are going to be working through for that particular lesson. Also notice in the lesson that the individual portions of it, the introduction, the lesson steps, and the summary and review also have time estimates. Of course, depending on your teaching style and how you let those conversations develop, it may take a little more or a little less time, but this is in general pretty accurate for how long you can expect the lessons to take. Further, if you see any of these slide deck previews, those are thumbnails of the slides that are provided through the JA of Central Maryland website. They are provided by unit, so when you access or download income, you will get every slide for every lesson in income. You can save those to your desktop. It is open source, so you can just use them, access them anytime at your leisure. You'll also see that some lessons include an online assessment option. These options can relate to the extension activities and can often be used for enrichment if you have a little bit of extra time with your students on that lesson. Additionally, as you'll see here on the bottom right, digging deeper activities are offered periodically throughout the guide. They're optional for those particular lessons, and they provide an activity in writing, debate, reading that relates to the content and could be utilized as assignments outside of class or simply as enrichment within the lessons as you're doing them. After each lesson, you will have in your teacher guide a full page version of the student workbook pages that the students will be completing. So after lesson 3, there are these 2 copies that students will have completed. For the workbook lesson pages that are kind of open, if they're not necessarily a right or wrong answer, you'll just have a copy. For any pages like this one on the right where students are computing taxes and taking them out of a monthly income, if there's a right answer, you will have the right answer. It will function as an answer key for you as well. Okay. The extension activities, these are, excuse me, I'm going to go back just let me just go back one here. Are there any questions on the student workbook pages?
Yes, I have workbooks from last year. Are they still usable?
Yes. Yes, that's a great question. The student workbooks actually, as you'll see here, they're going to look just like this. We have not had a major redevelopment of the workbooks in the last 3 school years. So if you have any dated 2016 or more recent, you are actually going to be able to use those. There may be a very slight wording change on 1 or 2 of the pages, but any workbooks you have left over from the last couple of school years will still be valid. Extension activities, as we saw before, there are 8 extension activities within the first unit. The extension activities themselves are much like the general lessons where they have workbook pages that correlate as well. If there's a right or wrong answer, again, the answer key will be denoted in that workbook, excuse me, in the teacher guide for you. All right. Sorry, I had to switch slides there for a second. Going into the content itself of the lessons, as mentioned, there are 4 individual units that you're going through prior to the simulation. The first unit, we're going to touch on the content of it and a real quick synopsis of the individual lessons, since you're now familiar with the layout of each one. So the traditional first unit is income. It includes 3 core lessons, and it includes those 8 extension activities. The lessons themselves, they are going into students learning about exploring careers. They're learning about how to make money, how to make sure that they're doing so wisely. The first lesson of the 3 is called income. It's called Plan Your Future. In the first lesson, they're defining income. They're learning about personality traits. In that first lesson, they're also looking at a worker profile activity and exploring some career exploration tools as well. In the second lesson, they focus on careers. They learn about career readiness. They explore career clusters and how their knowledge and skills will prepare them to be successful within those career clusters. The third lesson of the core lessons talks about taxes and their income. They explore the different types of income, or excuse me, the different types of taxes, income, sales, and property taxes, and they use those to figure out net monthly income for a few sample salaries. At the end of the income unit, as with all 4 of the units, there's an assessment. This is the only material that's actually not made accessible in the student workbook because we don't want them jumping ahead to just complete it. So you'll have a copy of this assessment in your teacher guide as well as the answer key. This is the only thing that you might need to make a photocopy of. This assessment has about 11 questions. It's in your teacher guide, and feel free to use that at your leisure. It does not need to be reported to JA of Central Maryland. The second unit in the course plan is saving, investing, and risk management. In this second unit, as you'll see, all of the pages are this color, and that is the symbol that's in the upper right hand of each page. There are 2 core lessons and 5 extension activities. Those 2 core lessons, lesson 1 focuses on saving and investing, the concept of paying yourself by saving funds first, setting savings goals, understanding interest, and managing all aspects of your saving. Lesson 2 goes really deeply into managing risk. It talks about insurance policies, the value of those insurance and safeguarding your money, what an insurance premium is, and all related topics as it pertains to insurance. The assessment at the end of the second unit has 9 questions. Again, it's available in your teacher guide for photocopying and using at your discretion. The third unit of content is debit and credit. Debit and credit consists of 4 core lessons and 5 extension activities. Lesson 1 in debit and credit is called Banking Partners. It focuses on separating banks and credit unions and the differences between those, internet banks, online banking, mobile banking, just the different types of financial institutions that individuals will encounter when they need to start making these banking choices. Lesson 2 is covering personal spending, talks about electronic payments, introduces the concept of credit, bankruptcy, and explores a little bit more about mobile banking. Lesson 3 includes that Savvy Shopper game that's one of the physical materials you will receive, and talks in depth about debit and credit payments. And lesson 4, managing credit, really dives deep into the meaning of credit, what a credit report is, what a credit score is, and how you can responsibly manage your credit for a successful financial future. The assessment at the end of debit and credit has 10 questions, and again, it's provided for you in the teacher guide. The last lesson that comes before the simulation is called Budget Plus. Not surprisingly, you might guess this goes really deep into budgeting. So there are 3 core lessons and 3 extension activities. The first of those core lessons is Think Before You Spend, where students talk about wants versus needs, what impulse buying is, and setting long and short-term goals. Lesson 2, What is a budget? They learn how to create those budget categories, mapping out discretionary income, budgeting their money and their time. And then lesson 3, which is really geared towards a lead into the simulation, talks about using a budget, making sure that you've not just planned it out, but you're following it, what an opportunity cost is, scarcity, and they start exploring life scenarios for different earning potentials. There's again an assessment at the end of the Budget Plus unit, includes 10 questions, which is made available in the teacher guide. After all of the units have been completed, that's when we're going to dive into the simulation. As has been denoted, we do our virtual simulation here in Central Maryland. It's accessible through a site, which we will be showing you in just one second here. There are 4 sessions that make up the online simulation, and it's typically done in school, but not necessarily. It is going to be accessible to students round the clock. It's able to be accessed anytime whatsoever.
Sam?
Yes.
Is this a good time for questions?
Yes, this is a great time.
Okay, perfect. So with the simulation, how long are the simulation sessions?
So the 4 sessions, they can take up to about an hour. I would say typically students take about 30 to 45 minutes. There's the units of, there's the content for each one, and there's some additional games. So it can be done in 30 minutes, but I would say a solid 45 minutes per session.
Okay. And they don't need to do it, my classes are 90 minutes, so they don't need to do them all in one sitting, is that correct?
Correct, yes. You'll have 4 sessions, and actually they need to be completed by session. So if you start session 1, it's not going to be able to save progress until you finish session 1, but once you finish session 1, it's done, it's checked off, it saves your progress, and when that student logs back in, they will start right at the beginning of the last session, or at the beginning of the session they were in.
Okay, and is there a way that I can follow what they're doing in the simulation?
Yeah, you are asking all the right questions, and this is actually a great time for us to transition to show you what the simulation looks like, because the best way to understand is to kind of see how it looks. So what you're going to see is a template that's going to be just like this. When you log in to your simulation here, you are going to go to your school. When you click on home, it's going to take you to a screen that looks just like this. And what you will see within this is when you go to your name, you will see that you have classes added in. JA of Central Maryland is the administrator of the site, so we actually have to enter these classes for you. And the JA staff person that you work with will be able to add as many classes as you need. When you go into the individual classes themselves, you will see that there is a not active status because it hasn't started. There's an activation date and an expiration date. When you go in, you will see this format for your students. I added this one here as a template, but on the top right here, you will see the ability to create multiple students at once, which when you go to it, you'll be able to add usernames, passwords, their first name, last name. I do strongly recommend that you do not use the pre-populated passwords when you're adding in your students. These populated passwords use the letter 0, lowercase, uppercase, O's, so it can be hard to distinguish between these characters. You can make the exact same password for all of your students, and I highly suggest that you do that. Once you have your students in, you as teacher will be able to go to the Session Access tab, where you will see every student that is registered in your class, you will also see if they have completed any of the sessions. So if they've done the first and second session, then this will switch to yes, but you'll still see that no, they have not completed sessions 3 and 4.
Sam,
Does that make sense?
how long are student logins valid for?
Also, good question. So when you go to your actual classes, you will see that there's an activation and an expiration date. Before your students go into the simulation, you'll add every student, create a username and password. As soon as the first student in this class uses that username and password, that'll make the class active. There's nothing that you need to do or nothing that you need to ask Junior Achievement of Central Maryland to do to activate your class. It really only happens as soon as the first student logs in. That date is the activation date for that class. And every student will be able to use that class, that login, username, and password for 6 months. The expiration date will automatically populate to 6 months after the activation date. So it should be able to be accessible for most of the school year, and oftentimes it's more than enough time for teachers. If for some reason you do the lessons at the start of the school year, they do the simulation, and then towards the end of the school year, you really want your students to have access to the simulation again, but it has been 8 months, that's A-OK. Just reach out to JA of Central Maryland. We can create as many classes as you need. We can create repeat classes if you have students that want to do it again for that second time of the year. Does that help?
Yes. And just curious, in case I forget this, are there any written instructions I can follow about this?
Yes. After you complete this training and when you receive your materials, you'll be reached out to by your representative at JA. They're going to send you a quick tech guide. If for some reason you don't have that email that they send to you, that is actually accessible also from the JA of Central Maryland website, where you get to the PowerPoint slide. You can go to this simulation technical guide, and it'll, excuse me, it'll pull up that sheet so you can see some of the quick and easy solutions that we've found for most of our teachers. Great.
And I have one more question.
Yeah.
How many computers will I need? Is it per student to access this?
Yeah, the simulation is self-guided, and this is actually probably a good chance to give you a preview of what it's going to look like. When you're in that simulation, you'll see up here, you'll have the option to play game. What play game does is it creates a non-saved trial version of the simulation, so you can try it out and kind of see what the students are going to see. But as you'll see, it's interactive, it's engaging, and it's very self-guided for students. One of the great things about that progress tracker that I showed you earlier is that you don't need to watch over the student's shoulder to see how far along they've gotten. It really is going to take them step by step through the simulation. This is what you're going to see. You may be able to hear my audio. You may not. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is mute my audio so you can hear me clearly. This is what students are going to see. Anytime that there's a direction, instructions that they can hear, you are going to also have a text bubble. So if they do not have access to headphones, or you don't want to hear 20 different computers actually going through all the instructions, you can mute it and they'll have all the instructions right there in front. But yes, students will need one computer per student because it does take up the entire computer. They get their own life scenario. It's very individually based. When they log in, this is the game that they're going to see where they make they make choices about what kind of a lifestyle that they want to have. They'll make choices about technology, their TV and their internet, what kinds of entertainment they like to do, their favorite cuisine. It always starts off for students with this kind of shocking, this is how much money I've spent. This is how much money I make, $2,200 or $2,200 a month. And I've already, based on those choices, spent $2,100, about $100 short of all the money I'm making. That leads them into the simulation where they're introduced to the avatar that guides them along. They'll see their life scenario up here in the top. They'll learn about their financial portfolio, including their salary, on which they're going to base their net monthly income. And if your school has calculators for students, that's great. If not, there is a calculator embedded in the simulation itself. And this is Casey, who is the avatar that guides them through each one of the choices that they're going to be making. Again, always is a text bubble. You'll never need to have audio, but if they have headphones and some nice components to the simulation.
Excuse me, how many different life scenarios are there?
You know, that is a wonderful question. There is a good number. I believe there is at least 20. I have not gone in and dived through and explored each and every one, but it's a really wide range that students are going to have. The life scenarios are totally random. So you may have students sitting next to each other who have a job earning $90,000 a year, and you may have someone who is earning $38,000 a year. One of the cool things about that is that, you know, they're going to see this all in a really controlled environment, and they're going to see the impact of, you know, these salary changes on the choices they have to make month in, month out, and the things that someone who is earning a lower income just may not have access to and be able to do. So it gives a really good view of how salary impacts lifestyle and the value of planning and saving and all of those components.
Great. Now, can you share if teachers or our students can access the simulation before we finish the curriculum?
Yes. Probably a great time to transition back here to our presentation. The lessons are done traditionally after the last unit, Budget Plus, but it really is geared towards being done after all of those curriculum units. You as a teacher will have access to the simulation as soon as you're registered, and your JA representative will send you your username and password. This is the URL that your program is going to need to use. You can access this anytime. You can get your classes prepared. Like I said, it's not going to activate your class until the first student logs in. I don't suggest giving the logins to your students until you finish the curriculum, because if they have all the information, they will go in. And it really is meant to be done after the curriculum pieces. That's a very good question. As teacher, responsibilities include really just making sure that students are going to be able to have access to that technology. I know oftentimes it may be done in a computer lab, and testing can complicate computer time at the end of the school year. Most computers these days are going to meet minimum technology standards. You'll need to set up the actual students and their usernames, passwords. Within the simulation itself, you'll be able to print off a quick start guide for students, which lists their username and passwords, so you're not needing to make copies or write down the individual usernames and passwords. It's just a function that you'll be able to print off and hand out to the students. And as mentioned, the sessions are self-guided, so it's really just making sure the students have time to go through.
Sam, before you tie up, may I ask another question about the simulation?
Of course.
Great. So I really could see my students doing some of this at home because of our daily schedule. With them moving ahead in the simulation, when they come back to class, would they be at the same place with the rest of the class, or is there a way to stop them from going so far ahead of the rest of the group?
That is a good question. Let me pop back here. That's my contact information, which I'll pull up at the end of this presentation. If you're in here in your profile, you have your class, you have a student that's listed in there, session access, reports tab is where you can get that quick access. The session access is actually where you'll be able to access that functionality that you're referencing. So you can restrict access. Right now it defaults to always letting students just log in and go through each and every one of the sessions. If you're doing it on an extended timetable and you say, hey, students, sometime this week you want to go ahead and finish session 1, and then next week we're going to talk about it, and then I'll allow you to access session 2. You're just going to click these check boxes up here so that students cannot access session 2, 3, and 4, and that'll really just impede their progress. They'll finish session 1, it'll save their progress, it just won't automatically move into session 2. And that's a great option if you are able to do it on kind of an extended timetable, and if you're doing it from home like you had referenced. Great question. Any other questions on the simulation itself? All right, so going back, just as a kind of a recap to what we started on our presentation, after finishing this training, this will qualify you as a teacher for JA Finance Park Virtual. You will either have a coordinator within your district that's been working directly with JA of Central Maryland, or maybe you have been working directly with myself or another JA of Central Maryland staff. As you are now a qualified JA Finance Park teacher, you can access our materials request, which is through the exact same website URL that you accessed this teacher training. In that program registration and material request, it's going to ask a lot of basic information about your program, your physical address, who will be receiving materials, because as mentioned, these are being sent via UPS volunteers who will physically be coming to your school with your materials. They are going to include those workbooks, that teacher curriculum if requested and you don't have a teacher curriculum, and they're all going to be labeled to your attention or to the lead teacher at your school. All that information is going to be gathered at that program registration survey, and we will be responding to you just with kind of some updates. Within a week after that, you'll get a confirmation that everything was received, and pending availability, the UPS shipment will go out as soon as possible. I will make a note that UPS will not be able to deliver between the months of November and January, as it is their high season, and there's a lot of gifts going in that time of year. So as this is going to be a great volunteer shipment, there will not be shipments delivered to schools between the months of November, December, and January for any of our schools.
I think you mentioned this earlier, but can you remind me, am I able to pick up materials if I didn't want to wait for that shipment?
Yes, yes. So if you really want to do it in the winter and you're not able to do the training until after that November time period, you will always be able to pick up materials. And when you complete your program registration and materials request, there is a portion where you will note, I would prefer to pick up my materials, where you give your contact information, that you'll be the one picking them up. Pickups are going to be available at our offices Monday through Thursday between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. All of the confirming address information will be sent to you directly after you do that registration. But yeah, pickups are always welcome. We just like to have a little bit of notice so we can package them for you and have them ready for you when you come by. Are there any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for working with Junior Achievement of Central Maryland, for implementing the JA Finance Park program at your school, for engaging your students in the virtual simulation. We're happy to be working with you, and please do not hesitate to reach out to me or Junior Achievement of Central Maryland with any questions. It's my direct line and my email, and I am the Capstone Director here at JA of Central Maryland. Thank you very much for your time, and have a wonderful day.